Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we're here for another poetry discussion. Today's poetry discussion comes to us from the famous to a prior generation, infamous to my generation, Seamus Heaney. Seamus Heaney? Seamus Heaney, I believe. That's how I heard it. The poem in question is called Digging, published in 1966, and it reads as such. Between my finger and my thumb the squat pen rests, snug as a gun. Under my window a clean rasping sound when the spade sinks into gravelly ground. My father digging, I look down. Till his straining rump among the flower beds bends low and comes up 20 yards away, stooping in rhythm through the potato drills where he was digging. The coarse boot nestled on the lug, the shaft against the inside knee was levered firmly. He rooted out tall tops, buried the bright edge deep to scatter new potatoes that we picked, loving their cool hardness in our hands. By God, the old man could handle a spade, just like his old man. My grandfather cut more turf in a day than any other man on Toner's bog. Once I carried him milk in a bottle, corked sloppily with paper. He straightened up to drink it, then fell to ride away, nicking and slicing neatly, heaving sods over his shoulder, going down and down for the good turf, digging. The cold smell of potato mold, the squelch and slap of soggy peat, the curt cuts of an edge, through living roots awaken in my head, but I've no spade to follow men like them. Between my finger and my thumb the squat pin rests. I'll dig with it. So, I mentioned famous to probably the prior generation, but infamous to my generation. Why do I say that? Well, Seamus was quite renowned as a poet, so renowned as a poet that he won the Nobel Prize for Literature in, I believe, 1995. And if you have boomer generation literature professors at the college level, probably they saw Seamus Heaney live. Probably they went to watch him speak, or he spoke at their campus. I say that because the guy got around in the day, and he is infamous to my generation, not for his poetry. I guarantee you there are probably any number of individuals in my generation who don't even know he wrote poetry. I believe he passed recently. I'm not 100% sure. I believe he passed recently. But we know him, not his poetry, but we know him and a link to poetry, not because we follow the awarding of Nobel Prizes in literature, but because he translated Beowulf. And probably, if you have read Beowulf, and you are my age or younger, my age being, I don't know, 22, 25, somewhere in there. If you were my age or younger, and you have read Beowulf, probably it was Seamus's translation of Beowulf. That said, so my book here has his birth date is 1939. I believe that's right in line with Charles Bukowski's birth date. I believe Bukowski was 1936, maybe, somewhere in there, nonetheless. But when you think of this poem here, and you think of Charles Bukowski, one of them feels, to me at least, a whole lot younger. One of them feels, to me at least, maybe a bit cutesy. One of them feels, to me at least, I'm going way back here in this book for the Bukowski poem. Maybe he was born before that. One of them feels, to me, less contrived. I think that this poem from Seamus Heaney is awfully cutesy, is awfully contrived, and is a little bit like the poetry equivalent of a sitcom. What does a sitcom love to do? A sitcom loves to set up a joke and have a payoff. But if you really pay attention to sitcoms, one thing they love to do, set up a joke, have a punchline early in an episode, which comes back late in the episode. This returned the idea of the cutesy little line of I don't have, or the between my finger and my thumb, the squat pin rests snug as a gun. But it's not a gun. The pin is mightier than the sword, right? Is that sort of the point we're getting at here with Seamus's allusions to previous generations of men working, toiling away with such rudimentary tools as the spade? It doesn't seem to be. Seamus does not seem to be making that commentary. Seamus seems to be paying homage to those individuals' work ethics. He seems to be curtsying, if you will, to that rougher generation with his contribution being more intellectual. I appreciate all of the toil that you have put forth. And now, instead of these, I'm going to use this. I got two of these. I'm going to be doing work. Instead, I'm going to use one of these. Work smarter, not harder, right? The lineage here is all men. My grandfather, my father, and I. Is that necessary? Why is that? Is this an apology for the fact that my generation does not have to do the work that your generation did? Or is this sort of saying my type of work is in line with the old-fashioned toiling? Or is this somehow to say that my line of work with the pen is superior to your line of work that grew food? Your line of work that tilled the fields. There is a disconnect here. It's obvious. So the cold smell of potato mold, the squelch and slap of soggy peat, the curt cuts of an edge through living roots awaken in my head. But I have no spade to follow men like them. Why not? Why not? This is sort of at odds with contemporary poets to Seamus Heaney, such as Robert Frost and Charles Bukowski. Frost was constantly saying, yeah, I do this writing thing, but, I do it after I spend a whole day picking apples. I do it after I spend a whole day at this hard labor. Bukowski's speaker. rather, sort of made it an inference that the poetry wasn't a real thing. Much in the way that Hemingway said that he taught Ezra Pound to box in exchange for Ezra Pound teaching him to write. Then Hemingway would remind you, my writing is nothing, right? There is, on some level, with most writers, so where's the idea of masculinity? Is it in the toiling work as opposed to the brain work? And those three, Frost, Bukowski, Seamus Heaney, and Seamus Heaney here, not to say anything of his larger, I don't know much about his overarching works, but Digging is one of his better known poems from what I understand. Frost making the idea that the idea of merit, the idea of worth, is in the work, the labor. The poetry is to be done at night as frosting on top of the day. Bukowski made much of toilsome labor which didn't really even pay the bills. So how much masculinity is there? How much adulthood is there if we're not even taking care of ourselves? Heaney here is really sort of dancing around the edge of whether or not the intellectual work is the same as that toil. He says, I don't have the spade to be doing that work, but I've got this pen and I'm going to go to work with it. I think very much depending on your reading of this poem, I think your reading of this poem depends very much on how you think of those levels of work, those types of work. Is there even a differentiation in your consideration? I think this is only a problem, the consideration is only problematic for someone who comes from this sort of working class. Your erudite British poets with their nose in the air. Oh, yes. Put my pen to the paper. Yes. I don't think they would consider much of a difference. Now, I'm not picking on British poets. I'm just saying, like, that upper class echelon of people to whom the intellectual work is nothing new. They were born into the stratosphere where that would be accepted. I think that this type of struggle for individuals like Bukowski, for individuals like Seamus Heaney, for individuals like Frost. I don't know much biographical information about Frost, to be honest, but it seems that the argument from these individuals is that their type of work has to be mentioned with toilsome labor, that their poetry has to be mentioned with toilsome labor in order to allow it any type of merit at all. It's not superfluous. The intellectual things are not simply throwaway to these people. But they seem to, this poem included, seems to play hell, absolute hell, to grant the work of poetry any type of real life merit. Why? Because no one eats poetry. Right? Poetry is not defending your country from invasion. Though all of these poets seem to find it part of the human experience. And what a strange thing that is as well. That is all I have for this poetry discussion of Digging by Seamus Heaney. I hope to have you back for the next poetry discussion, short story discussion, read along, whatever it is that we happen to have going on the channel. And yeah, if you hit that like button, it really helps me out here on the channel. If you're here by chance but not design, consider hitting the subscribe button in order to make sure that my videos keep being suggested to you in the future. And once again, I really do hope to see you for the next video.